initially is I worked in the oil industry on big, complex technical problems as a scientist, looking at engine oils for massive ships. And then I spent a decade doing innovation consulting, so working on customer facing projects, creating brands, products, and services. So primarily I come at this as a doer, as a person who has been having to work in lots of collaborative environments. And then since 2016, I kind of basically took some time. I mean, probably you've all had different crisis points in your careers where you're like, what am I for? What am I doing? What direction do I want to go? And I had a big one of these and realized that basically I wanted to orientate myself to how collaborative groups really work and how we actually get things done across traditional boundaries when we can't rely on command and control. So I've kind of been focused on that since 2016. This current moment is an interesting one because um, often we're sort of all thrust into this very new way of thinking about things. Often people are um, working from home for the first time. I've managed a remote team, been in lots of remote teams, and worked remotely for like the last 2 years. Um, One of the things that's interesting about the moment, these are my slides, by the way, is we're actually dealing with sudden remote collaboration in a crisis rather than just remote collaboration. So while some of what I'm going to say is more general, some of it's actually applying to the current moment, which isn't quite the same as how does remote collaboration work. Because often people are thrust into very new situations, a very new context. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to offer a simple frame for thinking about all collaborative groups, a model for thinking about collaboration that applies regardless of whether we're talking about remote or face-to-face collaboration. And I'm also going to then kind of throw in some comments about what needs special attention when you're collaborating remotely. Because I would basically argue that the fundamentals of working in groups is the same. And if we can think about that, but there are things that happen by default when we're face to face that we need to pay special attention to when we're remote because they don't happen by default. We need to be much more intentional about them. So the first is a really simple frame that probably the and this all can apply. Like I'm going to talk about collaboration, and it's a vague word, and sometimes I resent the fact that it's a word that I work with a lot because it can mean everything and nothing. But for the purpose of this, we're talking about getting things done with a group. So it could be a stable team that is working together and you need to collaborate, but it could also be a project, like a cross-functional project, or it could be a particular thing that you're trying to get done where actually people aren't even in the same organization. But if we think of it as getting things done in groups, what that is, then we can think about what do those groups need in order to get the things done that we're trying to get done. So that's the kind of frame I'm using. Um, um, I'm very interested in metaphors. A lot of the organizational metaphors that we have are very mechanical. We talk about or we think about the organizations that we're part of as kinds of like machines that we want to optimize and improve, right? And we can even begin to think of our teams like that, or what's the right part that we need to make this team work. And I'm going to suggest that a more healthy way of thinking about collaborative teams that causes us less stress as leaders is to think of a team or a collaborative group of any sort like a garden, not like a machine. So it's not something that you can get right or wrong. It's not something that is broken. It's something that needs constant attention. Something that is entirely dependent on your context. So there's no right way of doing a team. There's no right way of doing a collaboration. It's entire. So each of you probably has a situation or a context in mind. You've signed on to this webinar. You think, wow, I want to think about remote collaboration. You're probably thinking about something specific. So for you to think about that particular specific thing, and you can't complex and difficult emotions, like a garden with seasons and weather. In a way, we can think of the moment we're in as like a weather event that's happening in our teams. And so when a big weather event happens in a garden, you need to adapt. But actually, we're all familiar. There's always weather events happening in the teams that we're part of, always seasonal events happening. So we think of the teams that we're part of like a garden. And when we do that, we can start to think about, well, what needs attention? And essentially, what I'm going to introduce is a very simple model of the different dynamics that are going on in any collaborative group that's trying to get something done. So think of a specific context will probably help you here. Think of a particular group that's trying to get something particular done. There are essentially 5 dynamics to every single group. And these dynamics are swirling around in an organic mess, like in a garden, but they're distinct and understandable. And they represent the different almost channels that we need to tune into if we want to think about a team. The different frequencies, right, that's going on in the team, or the different lenses we can look at a team through. The model is, I did a TEDx talk, which we'll post so you can understand and get into the model a bit deeper. I'll zoom through it, but really then I want to focus on what are the implications for remote collaboration that kind of fall out of this model. So it kind of looks like this. It's kind of a nice swirly model. That's because these things are swirling around together. It's not like an order or a process that you follow. But the 5 things that need to go on that are going on in groups. The first dynamic is belief, right? So belief, we know that, and by the way, you're going to get this sheet at the end, which has some of this all on it. Belief, I mean, we know what it feels like, right, when there's belief in a team. And we also know what it feels like when belief has been drained from teams. So one of the things we need to pay attention to is there that sense of purpose? Is there that sense of direction, that sense of where we're headed into the future? And that sense of optimism that we can get there, right? That's like one dynamic, one thing that's going on in the team. The second dynamic is structure. And that's this nice red color here, structure. And structure is about the real practical stuff of any team that's trying to get anything done. What's the plan? How much money have we got? What's the scope of the work or the scope of what we're doing? Is everyone clear about accountabilities and responsibilities? It's the structural stuff of teams. And when we have a clear structure, we feel calm. And when we don't have the right structure, we feel chaotic, anxious. So again, you can start to see that feelings play into these dynamics. And a team without structure or with the bad structure will feel different from a team without belief. The third dynamic is involvement. And involvement is that in any collaborative group, who are the people who are involved in this group? And how do we get the best out of what everyone brings? Again, good involvement feels like people feeling respected, but also when people are well involved, they're open, they're more able to share their ideas, and they're more receptive to other ideas. And when people are badly involved, you're going to see resentment, you're going to see frustration. The fourth dynamic is progress. And progress is, again, it's nice to have involvement, right? Lots of ideas, lots of different people's voices being heard. Maybe we have that sense of really respecting each other. But if we want a collaboration is getting things done in groups, so we need progress. And progress is anything where we're moving from discussion to action. If involvement is calling out the different voices, progress is sometimes kind of a bit of conflict to decide on what we're going to do, to move into experimentation, to test things, to measure our success as a team. And when we don't have progress, they might be bored, they might be frustrated. You might feel there's a kind of a collapse that happens when there's not enough progress in a group. And when there is progress in a group, that's when excitement is released. Right, and then the fifth dynamic is this green dynamic here, is care. And so care is about that, as well as that, you have the relational aspects of the team, and you have the the bonds that you're creating, the sense of us that's being created in any collaborative group, right? And when you don't have a good sense of us, like, oh, we're together as humans, like David, Oliver, Suze, Alina, like we're in it together. And when you have that, you enough care, you will see resilience, and you'll see that sort of a deeper, lasting commitment. That's really about the commitment to each other. And without care, I mean, sort of goes without saying, but you kind of know what it feels like. If you don't feel like people are on your side, if you don't feel like you're in a group that where actually as a human you're valued. And so if you think about any group that's trying to get anything done in any context, you need enough belief, you need a good structure, you need to involve the right people, and people need to be involved well. You need progress and you need care. And if you like, teams go wrong in these 5 different ways, right? And it feels very different if a team's going wrong because of care, or going wrong because of progress, or going wrong because of structure. So the thing that guides us on this is that really, when we're talking about collaborating well with other humans to get something done, the center of the model, the center of this like way of thinking about groups is presence. That is, you need to show up. So if you're a leader of a group, to be paying attention to what's going on. And again, like good gardeners, we're looking at what needs our attention. So maybe you're thinking of a specific group now that you're in, and you can almost begin to measure yourself or measure the group against those dynamics, right? And so, and this, there's much more I could go into about that, and I won't. But my whole work is centered around this model, and have built tools and stuff around it. But I think what bears talking about in this conversation is, and so what when we're remote? And and essentially, there are certain things or certain aspects that need more attention because they happen by default face to face. So I'm going to start with care, and go back around the other way. If you think about when you're mingling and you're actually there face to face, a lot of the relational work happens automatically. And when you're at a distance, the relational work doesn't happen automatically, and you have to be really intentional about it. So this is where, and I'm going to talk at the end about digital tools because there is something to say about that. But maybe I'll just say before I go in, there's lots of different digital tools you can use, and they're not the success or failure. Which ones you pick aren't the success or failure of your collaborative groups. It's the human dynamics at play. So it's not about whether you use Slack or Microsoft Teams, or you just email everything. It's about whether you have the opportunity, in this instance, because we're talking about care, to build a sense of community, and to really feel the humanity of the people that you're working with. 2 kind of very practical things you can do. If you're having a remote meeting, which we are, but we've got half an hour, so we're a bit time pressed. But if we were like working, and we don't really have anything to get done together, but if we were collaborating on a complex problem, having a check-in at the start of a meeting is a really good way to bring a bit of humanity to things. So even just saying, what's one thing that's happening in your house today? But people also do, like when they're remote, you can also introduce things. Remember like in the early 2000s when people started going to workshops, kind of workshops were this very new thing in most organizations. And people would play kind of icebreaker games. And it kind of, at the time, felt very exciting. And wow, we're in these workshops and we're behaving in this new way. And over time, people got kind of a bit bored of that. But in online and digital spaces, you almost need to, as a leader, you need to reintroduce some of that permission and energy to have a bit of fun. So whether that's putting like little quizzes out on chat channels, or whether that's asking people, bring an object from your house and show all your colleagues. These things bring humanity and they bring care. So kind of finding ways to build community actively, and to inject a little bit of fun. is essential, strategically essential, to build a strong collaborative team at a distance. Second, on progress. Progress, that excitement you feel when things are moving forward. In an office environment, you often hear about progress happening, you overhear stuff, but you don't tend to overhear stuff when you're working remotely. So, as a leader of a collaborative team or a team that something you want to collaborate, then actually being more active about celebrating the things that happen, celebrating the small steps along the way that demonstrate progress. So, calling out into communal settings, whether that's on a chat channel or whether that's in a video call, making special time to celebrate what's gone well, and not seeing that as a distraction from the work. That is part of the work of progress. When we think about involvement, when we're working at a distance, when we're working remotely, you might need to revisit the behavioral agreements, because kind of everything's in it, especially in this situation where we're really collaborating. We're doing sudden remote collaboration in a crisis rather than slow and steady. It means everything's changed. Like, what are the agreements about how and when you can be contacted, when you'll be available? What are the ways in which you're going to use the channels that you have available? So again, in face-to-face environments, you have different channels. You have informal conversations by the water cooler or the coffee machine. You have you have a quick word. You have kind of in-depth conversations. You have different kinds of meetings. And in a remote setting, you need to kind of think about what are those different those different ways of involving people you're setting up. So, again, to talk a little bit about digital tools, I think an informal communication channel is really helpful. It can be WhatsApp, it can be Slack, it can be Microsoft Teams, but something informal is really helpful, because that's a type of communication that needs to happen and continue to happen in this setting. Kind of planning tools, and actually meta conversations about how we're working together need to happen. Kind of status updates and just regular like check-ins. How are we doing today? Like the stand-up from Scrum is a really good way of thinking about the beginning and end of a day. Just saying, what are you working on? What might get in your way, and what have you completed? Those kind of just really simple questions where you're just doing really quick, structured check-ins to hear from everyone. It's and that takes us on to kind of the structural side of this, which is both about which tools you pick, but again, I'm not here to tell you which tools are right for your context, but thinking about that there's different kinds of tools, and thinking about more than that, what are the rhythms and rituals you want to embed in your team? And so it's tempting to get distracted by the tools, but actually often the tools are imposed on us if we're part of an organization anyway. Like, we don't get to pick the perfect tool. And the truth is, like any tool to do anything, whether you're gardening or putting up a shelf, it's about how you use those tools often. And so thinking about getting to some coherent sense of which tools are right for us. Like I said already, like a morning check-in can be if you're worried about keeping everyone in order, then a structure is really helpful. Like, every morning we're going to have a 10-minute video call where everyone's just going to say in one sentence what they're doing today, right? And then we're going to have another one at the end of the day, and everyone's going to say what they did, right? Something like that. Or other teams do that where you do that through an informal chat channel rather than in a video call. Because one of the things you want to avoid is getting obsessed with creating the same ways of working as you created in an office. Actually, digital tools open up new possibilities, like being able to work on a document concurrently. So actually, a tool like Google Docs and Microsoft Office 365 has this as well, where you can actually work on the same document at the same time. In a remote context, which again, we're often talking about a remote flexible context. At the start of the call, someone was saying, "Oh, my kids are here, I can't get them." Like, often, actually, a lot of the people that we're working with are dealing with complexity of life that's multiplied. Like my partner is pregnant, which is really exciting. Um, and also, I'm the only human that she has contact with, and she needs a lot of contact with humans. So I'm having to change all my work structures, not just around um, the work that I've got to get done, but also about the changed context that we're in. And this is a really, like, again, we're not talking about remote collaboration. We're talking about remote collaboration that's happened suddenly and dramatically, and that is happening in a global health crisis. So you might have people who are full of anxiety, people who, like my neighbor, lost his best friend, right? So these could be the team members, and so I think I think the biggest thing that goes missing when we start working remotely is the human touch and the softer stuff. So the the getting a chance to, in an office, people have a chance to unload some of what's going on for them over coffee, or in ways that are appropriate because you're just waiting for other things to happen. So the death of remote collaboration would be an over formalization of it, or over professionalization of it. Actually, what we need is a deep humanity. Um, and so I'm sort of like whizzing around slightly, but this framework is useful because in your context, different things will be needed. And the last point is belief. So we said care, right? How do we create community? How do we inject fun? Progress, how do we celebrate stuff and also continue to learn how to do this and not expect that we get it right the first time? Involvement, what kind of agreements do we set around contact? And what are the different channels of contact that we have? Structure, what are the rhythms and the rituals that we have? And then lastly, belief. Actually, humans are funny animals because the extent to which we believe in something is the extent to which it's possible for us to create it. So as a leader, what you need to do is also inject some of that conviction that, you know what, in this moment we can hunker down and we can achieve everything that we could achieve face to face, but we're doing it remotely. And actually some of that energy of optimism and possibility and purpose, and really tuning into whether the global situation has changed anything as a result of whether your team matters or not. Because what you want to do is, again, if you want any collaboration to work, there needs to be the sense that this matters and that in this moment, now is the time for it. So that's a kind of whistle stop tour of how collaboration works from the fundamentals rather than, and there's loads of great tips out there of this, you should use this tool for that, this tool for that. But actually remembering that the human dynamics at play are the ones, and you'll probably, even as I've been talking, you will have tuned into one of those dynamics maybe needs your attention in the team that you're involved in. Is it belief? That people need to believe in this more? Is there a sense of purpose that you need to inject? Is it that you need to adapt the structure and bring the anxiety levels down by giving clarity? We're going to do this here. This is the rhythm. This is the ritual. Is it about involvement? Are some people dropping off the radar and do you need to bring them back in? Is it progress? Is there not that sense that you're getting stuff done? And do you need to orientate people to celebrating what's happening and how you're moving through this time? Or is it care? Do you need to bring that humanity and warmth and informality into how you're working at a bigger level than you have done before when it all happened incidentally? So that's a kind of quick work through remote collaboration. And I would just say that this model or way of thinking is to dig into it, watch the TEDx talk. It really gives you a new lens because you can de-escalate some of the drama that goes on in groups. It's really a way to see what needs your attention at the time without that being, you've got it wrong as a leader, you've not done enough. It's just like, okay, we need some more attention on care right now. Not, oh, I'm not caring enough, I've not built that well in the team. To really de-dramatize it and just bring the fact that, like a garden, remote collaboration is going to be messy. Things are going to spiral out of control or undergrow or underdevelop. But if you pay attention to the right things, like a good gardener, you can bring about the kind of liveliness and life that really is the core of what you want in a collaborative group. To dig a deeper into the dynamics of the team that you're part of is really helpful. And I do have a tool that's available on our website called the Collaboration Cards. And they basically break these dynamics down into much more kind of concrete aspects, right? So structure is about, okay, what's the timeline, or what's the scope, or involvement is kind of linked to your stakeholders, or progress. How do you move from discussion to action? So this model further broken down into a really practical tool that basically outlines what are the conversations that teams need to have in order to be healthy and thriving.